At the beginning of the movie, we see Sophie sleeping in her room when she suddenly wakes up after hearing a sound. She notices that her closet door is open and calls out to her mother in fear. But when she doesn't get a response, she gets out of bed and goes to investigate. Outside her room, she hears her mother screaming. And as she approaches her parents' room, her mother comes out and Sophie sees her father's dead body on the bed, and the scene cuts here. Following this, we see a criminal psychologist named Kate Fuller arriving at a crime scene. Detective McCarthy informs her that Helena murdered her husband, and they just need to evaluate her state of mind. Kate is shocked to see Matthew's dead body, and when she asks why they are showing her this, McCarthy explains that before she decides whether Helena goes to court or a mental institution, she needs to understand the reality of what they are dealing with. During her investigation, Kate finds something written on a piece of paper that spells Takahas. She then goes to meet Sophie, who is hiding under the bed, and when Sophie refuses to come out, Kate decides to crawl under the bed to talk to her. Kate gently asks Sophie to tell her anything she remembers from the previous night. Sophie, trembling, tells her that she heard scary noises, and when Kate asks who hurt her daddy, Sophie reveals the name Mara. Kate returns to Helena and asks her about Mara, but Helena screams in terror, and the scene cuts abruptly. Next, we see Kate with Helena in a confession room, where Helena reveals that Matthew confessed to her that he cheated on her with a student. She wanted a divorce, but he begged her to forgive him, but she just couldn't. Kate asks what happened last night, to which Helena explains that she woke up completely paralyzed, feeling pressed down into the mattress. There was something evil in the room, and she heard awful music. Then she saw the demon Mara, as real as Kate, sitting there. Mara climbed onto Matthew's chest and murdered him. Helena swears on Sophie that she did not kill him. That night, after much thought and despite her reluctance, Kate recommends that Helena be committed. However, she then hears a strange sound, and before she can understand anything, the wine glass on her table breaks by itself. The next day, Sophie visits Helena. An officer arrives and tells Helena that visiting time is up, asking her to come with him. Helena protests, insisting she is innocent, but the officer forcibly takes her away, separating her from Sophie. The next night, while Kate is sleeping at home, she suddenly wakes up and realizes she cannot move her body. She then hears a scary moaning in the distance, and to her horror, she sees a woman standing in front of her, and suddenly, Kate snaps out of paralysis. Later, Kate is sitting upset, looking at the drawing Sophie has made. She flips it over in frustration and notices something drawn on the back. Immediately, she recognizes it matches the piece of paper she found at Helena's house and finds Takahashi knows more and an address written on it. The next morning, Kate arrives at the address and finds the door of the house open. Upon entering, she notices that the house is in disarray. She searches for Takahashi and enters his room, where she discovers his dead body lying on the bed. She calls the police, and McCarthy informs her that the man is not a registered U.S. citizen. Kate points out that the injuries resemble those in Matthew's murder, but McCarthy dismisses the similarities as insufficient to suggest the same killer. She insists they should question Dougie, but he brushes her off, reminding her that she's just a psychologist and doesn't need to be involved in the investigation. Kate visits Helena at the mental hospital and asks if she knows Takahashi, but Helena remains silent. Kate then shares her own experience, explaining that when she was about Sophie's age, her mom started acting strange. About 6 months later, her mom was diagnosed with schizophrenia. Her dad couldn't cope and had her committed, and 3 weeks later, she hung herself. Kate reveals that her mom is the reason she became a psychologist, and that she understands what Sophie is going through. Helena reveals that Matthew always had a sleep paralysis problem. She wanted to help him, so she found a support group for sufferers in the city, run by Dr. Ellis, and there she met Takahashi and Dougie. Matthew was feeling much better, but that night he woke up paralyzed with a red mark in his eye, and he saw her. Kate promises Helena that they will find Matthew's killer, but Helena angrily insists that she already told her it was a sleep demon. She then shows Kate a red mark in her eye, explaining that she has been marked and that the demon is coming for her. Helena warns that if Kate doesn't get her out of there soon, she will die. Kate then attends a session led by Dr. Ellis, where people share their experiences with sleep paralysis. Everyone describes feeling or seeing something evil in their room. One of them, named Saul, says the entity is here now, watching them. He adds that he even sees her everywhere when he is awake and not paralyzed. Ellis asks Saul who he is talking about, and Saul responds that it is a haggard old woman sent by Satan. Just then, Dougie says it's Mara and warns Saul not to sleep. Ellis explains that what Saul saw was a hallucination, but Dougie insists it's a ghost and warns Saul that he is in grave danger. He approaches Saul, takes off his glasses, and says he is cursed. Ellis asks everyone to calm down, but Dougie tells Saul that he is in the final stage. He instructs Saul to do whatever he needs to do to stay awake, or he will die tonight. He then tells everyone that Mara is real and she will kill every one of them. And tonight, Saul dies. The next day, Kate tells McCarthy what Dougie said the previous night and suggests that he might be the killer. McCarthy responds that if she gets a lead, she should come to him and not follow it up herself. When Kate returns home, she gets a voicemail from Helena saying that Mara is getting closer and she needs to see Sophie to say goodbye. Kate calls the hospital but finds that the lines are closed. Meanwhile, we see Saul outside a church, terrified, and dousing himself with gasoline. He then recites some prayers and then sets himself on fire. Kate suddenly wakes up from her sleep and realizes that she is paralyzed. She tries to move, but to her horror, she sees the old woman under the table. The woman suddenly screams, and Kate snaps out of her paralyzed state. She fearfully moves towards the table to check underneath it, but suddenly her phone starts ringing. She picks up the call and McCarthy informs her that Saul is dead. McCarthy picks up Dougie for questioning and asks him about Takahashi, Matthew, and Saul, to which Dougie responds with a terse no comment. McCarthy presses further, asking if he killed these people, but Dougie continues to say no comment. Kate intervenes, asking Dougie about Mara and offering to help him if he talks. Dougie eventually opens up, revealing that he met Takahashi at the group session, who was the first person to see Mara. Initially, he thought he was going crazy, but Mara appeared to him that same night as well. He and Takahashi began investigating and discovered that Mara had been killing people since ancient times. Kate asks Dougie if he knows Matthew. Dougie confirms that he does, and also knows his wife Helena. He reveals that Matthew was marked and shows them a similar mark in his own eye. Dougie explains that he warned Matthew not to sleep, but Matthew didn't listen. Kate asks if this demon marks its victims first and then kills them, and Dougie confirms this. McCarthy questions why he is still alive when the others are dead, suggesting that he is the only suspect in the 3 murders, to which Dougie says, but he doesn't have a single shred of evidence against him. When they come out, Kate suggests, what if this demon is another aspect of Dougie's personality? McCarthy responds, still without any physical evidence, he can't make an arrest. He then tells her that they have a viable suspect now, so Helena can go home and be with her daughter. Kate visits the hospital to share the good news with Helena, but to their horror, they find Helena's dead body in her room. Kate is deeply upset by the incident, and that night, while she is trying to calm herself in the bathtub, she suddenly wakes up to find herself in a paralyzed state, unable to move. The bathroom door opens, and she starts hearing strange sounds. Mara then appears behind the curtain, and seeing her, Kate becomes terrified. Mara raises her hand and starts moving towards her, but suddenly she disappears, and Kate comes out of paralysis. However, her fear intensifies when she sees footsteps on the floor. Realizing that what she saw was not a dream, she quickly rushes in front of the mirror to check her eye and finds the mark there. The next day, she sneaks into McCarthy's office, where she finds Dougie's address and discovers a package containing a pen drive of Helena's death. She plugs the pen drive into McCarthy's computer and watches the CCTV footage. Shockingly, in one frame of the video, a dark figure is seen sitting over Helena and killing her. Kate visits Dougie, who shows her his research and explains that Mara has been seen by millions of people all over the world, known by various names. In medieval literature, art, and the Chinese Book of Dreams, Mara is mentioned, with the first recorded evidence dating back to 400 BC. Kate asks why Mara only kills a few when millions have seen her. Dougie admits he hasn't figured it out, but notices a pattern. Mara kills in clusters after significant events. He explains the stages of Mara's curse, Stage 1 is paralysis and seeing Mara, an experience millions have had. For some, it progresses to Stage 2. Mara marks you with red in the eye. Stage 3 involves physical contact as she climbs on your chest and grips your throat. Stage 4 means you'll see her when awake, and the next time you sleep, you die. She asks how he's still alive if this is true, to which he explains that he only sleeps for 20 minutes at a time because he has figured out that Mara only appears when you are in a deep sleep. Kate doubts that lack of sleep is affecting his mind, but he insists that she can believe in all the science she wants. But right now, he's telling her the truth. She is marked, and their only hope is to figure out what connects them all, or they will all die. Kate leaves there, but he warns her not to sleep and find the link so they can stop her. Kate visits Dr. Ellis to discuss her meeting with Dougie, but he provides scientific explanations for everything she mentions. He takes her to a sleep lab, which is designed to look like a typical room in a house so that the patient feels at home. The lab includes a control room where they monitor sleepers. Kate asks what this has to do with Helena's death, to which Ellis explains that what people see during sleep paralysis is directly influenced by the culture around them and things that scare them. For him, it was Freddy Krueger. In the old days, it was witches, and now it's aliens. Kate counters that Mara isn't part of their culture, so why did she see her? Ellis explains that Helena's story about her sleep demon scared her. When she later experienced sleep paralysis, she saw the same thing. He insists that Mara is not real, and that sleep paralysis cannot kill. That night, Dougie's generator stops working, causing all the alarms in his house to go off. Meanwhile, Kate wakes up to the sound of Sophie's voice in her house, calling out for her mom. Confused, Kate gets up from her bed and walks towards the window to check. She sees Sophie standing outside, but the next moment, she hears the voice from behind her, and Helena's ghost haunts her. Kate wakes up from sleep in a paralyzed state, and to her horror, she sees Mara standing beside her bed. Her fear intensifies as Mara climbs onto her bed and starts moving toward her. Mara sits on top of Kate and begins to choke her, but suddenly, Kate snaps out of her paralyzed state. The next day, Kate calls Sophie's grandpa to check on Sophie. He tells her that Sophie has been having bad dreams ever since she talked to Kate. She believes it was her fault that her mother got locked up. The next day, Kate receives a voice message from Dougie, who tells her that he fell asleep and is now at Stage 4. Meanwhile, Dougie, desperate to stay awake, cuts his eyelids to keep from falling asleep. Just then, Kate arrives and tries to calm him down, assuring him that there is no Mara. She promises to help him, but he has to trust her. She brings Dougie to Ellis's clinic, where Ellis tells Kate that they are both just exhausted. He assures her that all they need is a good night's sleep, and their problems will be over. After some time, Kate and Dougie fall asleep in the sleep lab, while Ellis and his assistant Carly monitor them from the control room. When nothing happens for a long while, Carly steps out for a smoke. While Ellis is momentarily distracted, Mara enters the sleep lab. Suddenly, Kate wakes up to see Mara moving towards Dougie, but because she is paralyzed, she is unable to do anything. She watches helplessly as Mara sits on Dougie's chest and throttles him. Ellis notices this, but by the time he rushes into the lab, Mara has already killed Dougie. As Ellis checks on Dougie, Mara approaches Kate and attempts to choke her as well. However, Ellis intervenes just in time and wakes her up. Kate visits the hospital and learns that Sophie experienced sleep paralysis the previous night and is now seeing things. Kate tries to talk to Sophie, but Sophie tells her that Mara is behind her. Hearing this, Kate becomes scared and tells Sophie's grandpa that Sophie is in the final stage. She warns him not to let Sophie sleep, or she will die. Grandpa, distressed and protective, asks Kate to leave, and before leaving, Kate promises Sophie that she will be back. Kate sneaks into Dougie's house to learn more about Mara, where she discovers that all of Mara's victims had some form of guilt. For instance, Saul killed his mom, Matthew had an affair, and Dougie was involved in killings in Iraq. She calls McCarthy and asks about Takahashi, explaining that he did something significant that caused all of this. McCarthy reveals that back in Japan, Takahashi was a chef in a primary school. He made a deal on some cheap, contaminated raw fish, which led to the death of 38 children. Takahashi had been on the run ever since. Kate theorizes that Takahashi ended up where they are now because his guilt over what happened brought Mara out. Mara killed Takahashi and then spread, drawn to people's guilt. She rushes to save Sophie, but on the way, she starts feeling sleepy. Kate tries hard to keep herself awake, and as she struggles, she sees Helena standing on the roadside. Suddenly, Sophie appears in front of her car, causing Kate to lose control, and her car collides with an electric pole. She catches a ferry to the hospital, but on the way, she falls asleep. After a while, when she wakes up, she realizes something is wrong. She hears footsteps approaching her, and suddenly Mara jumps down, frightening Kate. After this, she looks out of the window and sees Mara there, who suddenly attacks her. Terrified, Kate quickly gets off the ferry and starts running towards the hospital. She somehow reaches the hospital, but Kate realizes that Mara has followed her there. Kate rushes to Sophie, but before she can tell her anything, the lights suddenly go off, and Sophie goes into sleep paralysis. Just then, Mara arrives, and Kate tries to protect Sophie by telling Mara that she is the guilty one, not Sophie. Kate urges Sophie to blame her and tries to wake her up. Mara attacks Sophie, but Kate intervenes, and Mara suddenly disappears. Sophie tells Kate that she doesn't blame her and that she is innocent too. Kate assures Sophie that it's over, and she can sleep now. After this, Kate also sits on a chair nearby and falls asleep. After a while, McCarthy wakes her up and tells her that Sophie is fine, and he guesses it was all in her mind. Before leaving, Kate goes to see Sophie, but Sophie turns and says she forgives her, but Mom cannot. Helena appears and tells Kate that she will never forgive her for leaving her alone to die. McCarthy and Grandpa point Kate towards a chair, and to her shock, Kate sees herself sleeping there. Suddenly, she wakes up from her sleep, but realizes that she is paralyzed, and to her horror, she sees Mara approaching her. Mara comes closer and levitates in the air in front of her, and as Mara attacks her, the movie ends abruptly. Thanks for facing the frights with us. If you survived this video, drop a like, summon that subscribe button, and brace yourself for more horror. Until next time, stay spooked.